The late autumn Sunday sun slanted through the tall sash windows of the Williams family residence in leafy Surrey, casting long golden rectangles across the polished oak floor of their open-plan dining area. The house, recently renovated in keeping with 2025's British interior trends, was a seamless blend of heritage and modernity. Neutral linen upholstery, soft olive walls, warm brass lighting fixtures, and carefully curated vintage art that nodded to classic British sensibilities without veering into clutter. A low sideboard displayed framed photos of family Christmases and university graduations, and a subtle tartan throw draped over the armchair added a quiet nod to tradition. At the long, pale wood dining table sat 6 guests. Mr. Harold Williams, 78, a retired headmaster from a comprehensive school in Guildford, his son David, 49, a project manager at an engineering firm, David's wife Elaine, 2 old university friends, Robert and Claire Bennett, both barristers from London, and their 16-year-old daughter, Lily. Completing the gathering was Madison, David's 20-year-old daughter, home from her second year studying sociology at the University of Manchester. Madison had dressed for the occasion in contemporary British student fashion, light-wash straight-leg jeans, a cream mock-neck knit top, and white trainers, comfortable yet polished, in line with the smart casual norm for UK university students in 2025. Her dark chestnut hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, just enough mascara and lip tint to look put together without effort. The Sunday roast had been served: roast beef, crisp roast potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, and Yorkshire pudding, and the conversation drifted gently from Brexit's lingering economic effects to Lily's school play. Then Grandfather Harold, his voice still carrying the quiet authority of decades in education, turned to Madison and said gently, "You know, love, your course sounds fascinating. But never forget, no matter how much theory you learn, character still matters most. Hard work, honesty, humility, those don't go out of fashion." Madison, scrolling through her phone under the table, let out an audible sigh. Without looking up, she muttered, "Oh, come on, Grandpa. That's such outdated thinking. The world doesn't reward humility, it rewards confidence, connections, and clout. Nobody cares about character if you're not trending on TikTok." The table fell silent. Elaine set down her fork. Robert cleared his throat. Claire's eyes widened slightly. Lily shrank in her chair. Harold's weathered hands stilled on his knife and fork. He didn't speak, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. He'd taught thousands of students over 40 years. He'd walked Madison to her first day of primary school, held her when her hamster died, and sent her handwritten letters every month at uni. And now, in his own son's home, in front of guests, she'd dismissed his life's creed as outdated. David didn't raise his voice. But when he spoke, his tone carried the weight of finality. "Madison. Phone away. Now." She finally looked up, scowling. "What?" "I was just saying. You were just being deliberately disrespectful," David cut in. "To your grandfather. In this house. In front of guests. That ends now." Madison rolled her eyes, tossing her phone onto the table with a clatter. "It was a joke. Everyone's so sensitive these days." Harold said nothing. He simply pushed his half-finished plate away and looked out the window, his jaw tight, and that's when David knew this wouldn't be resolved with a stern word in private. This required more. David stood slowly, his tall frame commanding the room without aggression. "Robert, Claire, Lily, please, move into the sitting room. We'll be just a moment." His voice was calm, but firm, the same tone he'd used when signing off multi-million-pound contracts. The Bennetts exchanged a glance but obeyed without question. They'd known David for 20 years. They'd seen him mediate boardroom crises and school disputes with the same steady hand. If he said something needed handling, they trusted his judgment. Madison remained seated, arms crossed, as the guests filtered out. Elaine gave her a look that said you've gone too far, then followed them, closing the French doors between dining and living areas. Then it was just father and daughter. You know better, David said quietly, leaning against the sideboard. You know how much your grandfather means to this family. His living in the past. Madison shot back, her voice rising. I didn't say anything that bad. Didn't you? David stepped closer. You mocked his values. You dismissed his lifetime of integrity as irrelevant. In front of people whose respect matters. That wasn't just rude, it was cruel. Madison opened her mouth to argue, but something in her father's eyes stopped her. Not anger. Disappointment. Worse, in our house, David continued, disrespect like that doesn't get swept under the rug. Especially when it wounds someone who's always loved you unconditionally. He paused, then added, because you chose to do this in public, the consequence will be public too. Madison's breath hitched. Dad, no. Yes, he said. You know what's coming. He turned and walked down the hall to his study. When he returned, he held the wooden paddle, smooth, dark-stained, about 15 inches long. It hadn't been used in 3 years. Not since Madison was 17 and lied about missing curfew. Her face paled. Not in front of them. You made your choice when you spoke to your grandfather that way, David said. Now you'll face it. He opened the French doors. The Bennets sat on the sofa, Lily perched nervously on the edge of an armchair. Harold remained standing by the window, arms folded, gaze distant. David held up the paddle just enough for them to see. Madison has offended this family's core value, respect for elders. She'll be disciplined accordingly. I ask only that you bear witness, not to shame her, but to affirm that some lines must not be crossed. No one objected. Madison stood on trembling legs. Her cream-knit top felt suddenly too thin, her jeans too tight. She walked to the dining chair her father indicated, the high-backed, upholstered one near the bay window, and bent over its padded arm. Just as she'd done years before, David stood beside her, paddle in hand. 6 swats. Each for a reason. 1, for mocking your grandfather's wisdom. 2, for choosing cruelty over kindness. 3, for embarrassing this family in our own home. 4, for forgetting who raised you to be better. 5, for disrespecting a man who's never done anything but love you. 6, for the lesson you clearly still need to learn. Each strike landed squarely, sharp and stinging, muffled slightly by her jeans but unmistakable in its intensity. Madison bit her lip, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. It wasn't just the physical sting, it was the humiliation, the weight of her grandfather's silent presence, the knowledge that Lily had seen it all. When it was over, David set the paddle aside. Stand up. She did, slowly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her top. Her legs felt weak. Her backside burned, not unbearable, but enough to imprint the moment in her memory. David didn't speak. He simply nodded toward the sitting room. Madison took a shaky breath and walked through the doors. Her grandfather still stood by the window, but now he was watching her. His eyes were soft, not angry. She stopped a few feet away, then sank to her knees on the rug, just as she had as a child when she'd broken his favorite teacup. Grandpa, she whispered, voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry. What I said, it wasn't a joke. It was mean. And stupid. And wrong. She reached out, tentative, and covered his hand with hers. You've always believed in me, even when I didn't deserve it. And I threw that back in your face. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you know I'll never do something like that again. Harold didn't speak for a long moment. Then he gently squeezed her fingers. I forgive you, love, he said quietly. But don't make me doubt your heart again. She nodded, tears falling freely now, not from pain, but from relief. Claire handed her a tissue. Robert gave a small, approving nod. Even Lily offered a shy smile. That night, Madison lay in her childhood bedroom, walls still painted the soft sage green she'd chosen at 16, shelves lined with A-level textbooks and university prospectuses. The house was quiet. Her backside still ached faintly, but it was her conscience that throbbed louder. She thought of her grandfather's hands, how they'd held hers when she was scared of the dark, how they'd fixed her bike chain, how they'd trembled slightly when he'd hugged her at the train station last September that she'd called his wisdom outdated. But wasn't it his steadiness that had grounded her when her first boyfriend broke her heart? Wasn't it his letter after her failed exam that reminded her failure wasn't final? She'd confused confidence with arrogance, connection with cruelty. The next morning, she woke early, made a pot of Earl Grey, his favorite, and drove to his flat in Guildford. He opened the door in his cardigan and slippers. Surprised but smiling, she handed him the tea and a letter she'd written by hand. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe you could tell me more about your school days. The kids you taught. I'd really like to listen." Harold's eyes gleamed. "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks later, back at university, Madison sat in a seminar on social ethics. A classmate made a flippant remark about old people clinging to irrelevant values. Madison didn't laugh. Instead, she said calmly, "Actually, some of their values, like respect, patience, and integrity, are exactly what our generation needs more of." Her friend blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe you're right." At home in Surrey, David opened his study cupboard to file some paperwork. The paddle sat on the top shelf, undisturbed. He didn't move it, but he smiled.